Hello, everyone. My name is Kathy Choi. I'm the Executive Director for Women Cross DMZ. As I mentioned before, we are offering Korean language and English language translation tonight. So the instructions will be shared in the chat, and you can also go to the interpretation icon below and choose the language that you would like to listen to the presentation in. So tonight I'm here to introduce a very exciting report, the Women's Rights Under the Division System in Korea. This report is the result of years of research and collaboration among Korean women across borders and exposes the profound and persistent impact of the division system and ongoing militarization on women's human rights. We are so thrilled tonight to be joined by several esteemed speakers, Young-mi Cho, Jung-ah Lee, and Tae-jung Lee. Before I give them all the formal introductions, I'll just first introduce a little bit of framing for the report and then turn it over. So first, I want to make sure to thank and name each of the contributors listed here. Every individual listed here, among others, contributed to this years-long process, bringing this report into fruition. So we are so grateful and give deep bows to every person and individual who contributed. We released this report to coincide with three important events. First is International Women's Day. Second is the 69th Commission on the Status of Women at the United Nations. And the third is the 80th year of Korea's division. Since the failed 2019 Hanoi summit between US President Donald Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, tensions on the Korean Peninsula have continued to deepen. The ongoing crisis takes place against the backdrop of growing geopolitical competition between the US, China, Russia, to the point that now the Korean Peninsula has become a key site of contention with the so-called New Cold War. Relations between the two Koreas have also continued to deteriorate, and worsening relations suggest the growing entrenchment of what South Korean scholar Baek Nak-chung has referred to as the so-called division system, in which all states with stakes in this region, China, Japan, Russia, the US, and the two Koreas, have a vested interest in maintaining the status quo of a divided peninsula. One key concern and point of contention is the issue of human rights. On the one hand, a narrow definition of human rights has been weaponized in the Korean conflict to justify and enforce a policy of what President Trump himself has referred to as a maximum pressure campaign against North Korea. The issue of North Korean human rights, therefore, has become a prime example of polarization that has paradoxically pit human rights against genuine human security, exacerbating geopolitical competition in ways that reinforce the very structures that undermine the rights of peoples on the Korean Peninsula and the broader region. What's at stake here, then, are competing definitions of human rights and differing conceptions on how to address violations of those rights. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, first declared in 1948, the first 21 of the 30 of those articles are devoted to individual civil and political rights, such as rights to life, liberty, security, privacy, property. By contrast, only 6 Articles 22 through 27 address economic, social, and cultural rights, such as social security, education, employment, and adequate living standards. A focus on the former, that is, civil and political rights, underscores the problems of state violence, often leading to calls for regime change in North Korea and facilitating outmigration that leads to the potential of regime collapse. By contrast, a focus on economic, social, and cultural rights of individuals in the DPRK highlights the right to food, the right to basic needs, and leads to calls for the lifting of economic sanctions for the detrimental impact of such rights. While both sets of rights must be protected and enforced, external factors such as diplomatic engagement, technical cooperation, development, and humanitarian assistance would be required to address the latter set of rights, social, cultural, and economic rights. South Korean experts of human rights have therefore declared that we need more pragmatic approaches to human rights in North Korea, recognizing that the conditions of the two Koreas are linked, and we must center North Korean people, everyday civilians, as rights holders and their government as the primary duty bearer. The UN Charter the UDHR, and international covenants all emphasize the necessary conditions of international order, justice, and respect through which rights and freedoms can be guaranteed. Adopting a so-called human rights condition forming framework, this report provides examples of adverse impacts on women's human rights caused by Korea's division system and current geopolitical conditions. We highlight key issues, including the impact of militarization and ongoing war on women's rights through personal narratives and expert analysis, as well as suggestions for how such geopolitical conditions can be improved. For example, one of the most violent legacies of the ongoing Korean War and militarism are the landmines and unexploded ordnances. During the Korean War, all parties to the conflict laid landmines along the front lines in the area that is now called the demilitarized zone, separating the two Koreas. According to the international campaign to ban landmines, the DMZ has the highest concentration of landmines in the world, with an estimated 2 million mines buried in the DMZ. Landmines and unexploded ordnance remnants in the DMZ continue to cause significant harm to civilians, particularly women. Women victims of landmines remain underserved, and gender-responsive measures are lacking in demining operations. During the Korean War, military camptowns called 기지촌 were established around U.S. military bases that included clubs, bars, dance halls, providing various forms of sexual services to U.S. soldiers. U.S. versus Korea and the ROK government exploited Korean women's bodies to facilitate the so-called U.S. ROK alliance under a pretext of national security. In the report, we feature several human impact stories. One comes from Miss Park Young-ta, who lived as a so-called comfort woman from 1971 to 1995 in Dongducheon. She was one of thousands of Korean women who were registered and forcibly detained for STD treatment in what is euphemistically called the monkey house, where activists today are currently staging a sit-in that has been going on for months to protect the site for historical memory and justice. I encourage you all to learn more about their struggle. In June of 2014, with the support of women's organizations and lawyers, 122 women who had worked in military camptowns filed a lawsuit to hold the state accountable. Ms. Park was one of the plaintiffs who testified. In September 2022, the Supreme Court of the Republic of Korea ruled that it was illegal for the South Korean government to coordinate, manage, and operate military camptowns for the U.S. military. Women's groups now argue that the government must offer an official apology, gather data, provide systematic support for the surviving women, and they argue that the U.S. military and U.S. government should also be held accountable for the violation of women's rights. Another impact of militarization is the displacement of local farming communities and farming women. For example, in 2004, U.S. Army base Camp Humphreys in Pyeongtaek expanded to nearly 3,500 acres, making it the largest overseas base, U.S. military base in the world. To accommodate this expansion, the South Korean government forcibly expropriated 2,300 acres of adjoining land from rice farmers in the villages of Taechuri and Toduri. The woman you see here in this photo holds a sign of prayer and mourning for this forced displacement. Finally, millions of Korean families remain divided by the ongoing division system in Korea, with opportunities for reunification dwindling as separated family members age. Of the more than 133,650 people who have applied for the lottery to participate in inter-Korean family reunions since 2000, less than 32% are still alive. By 2025, it is projected that fewer than 30% of these individuals will still be alive. Reunions have stalled since the early 2000s, leaving families to rely on private brokers or limited government programs to locate loved ones. The 2017 Trump travel ban on U.S. passport holders has also prevented Korean Americans from reuniting with their loved ones. The ongoing division of families has a particular impact on women who bear the brunt of emotional, social, and economic burdens of separation. Please visit the link listed here, bit.ly/WRD report, and read more about the topics that I just shared, and also our recommendations to improve the human security and rights of women in Korea, namely a comprehensive and pragmatic approach to human rights, legislation that will address the gendered impact of landmines, accountability processes for survivors of militarized violence, and reunions with separated families. So I will first introduce Young Mi Cho. Youngmi Cho is the Deputy Director of Trans Education for Peace, Institute of Peace Momo. She is also on the Executive Committee of the Christian Conference of Asia, the International Committee of the National Council of Churches in Korea. She teaches university and graduate school students, sharing her knowledge while continuously expanding her own. Youngmi also co-founded our Korea Peace Now campaign and has been a longtime partner in Women Across TMZ's work, and we are so grateful and honored to have Youngmi with us again. So Youngmi will be presenting in Korean. So for those who would like to hear the English language translation, again, please go to the interpretation icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen, choose the English language channel, and you'll be able to hear the English language translation simultaneously. So turn it over to you, Youngmi.
안녕하세요. 반갑습니다. 네, 잘 소개해 주셔서 진심으로 감사합니다. 저는 방금 소개받은 조영미입니다. 저는 지금 대만에서 인사드립니다.
While doing a workshop with the
대만
hosts
도미니카
available
청년
here,
인권 활동가들과 함께
um,
청년들이 만드는 평화와
we have
민주주의,
had
인권에
conversations
대한
about
워크숍을 진행하고 있습니다. 이러한
human rights
프로그램
that need
모두가
to
이
protect
웨비나에서 만날 수
the
있어서
equality
굉장한
of
기분이
people,
있는 것 같습니다. 저는 여기에서 참가자들과 함께 워크숍을
and that
하면서
which
그들의 이야기를
must be
듣고
protected from our
나누면서
birth.
누구도 소외받지 않아야 하는 인권, 서로 불가분성과 상호성을 가진 인권, 평등과 차별 금지의 원칙을 지켜야 하는 인권, 그리고 무엇보다도 우리가 가장 일상에서부터 시작되는 인권에 대한 이야기를 나누고 있습니다. 그리고 아시아 곳곳에서 일어나는
I'm very grateful to be able to
인권의
join
문제,
the
구체적인
launching
문제에
webinar of this
공감하고
report.
그리고 아파하고 이를 극복하기 위해서 우리가 어떠한 연대가 필요한지에 대한
And
이야기를
special thanks to
함께
everyone
나누고
who has worked
있습니다.
in the background in order to
그런
make this report
가운데 분단
possible.
체제 하에서의 여성의 인권 보고서 런칭 웨비나에 참석할 수 있어서
Korea is a
대단히
country who has
기쁩니다.
experienced
이
divisions,
모든 과정에서 원고를 작성해 주신 분들,
war,
무엇보다
and
뒤에서 이
infringement of human
보고서
rights.
나오기까지 애써 주신 많은 분들께 특별한 감사를 드립니다. 여러분도 알다시피 분단
Militarization and
체제를
war
경험했고 독립과 분단
cause an
그리고
immense amount of
전쟁을
pain for
경험했을
all
겁니다.
people
이러한
involved.
경험은
This is
단순히
especially true
전쟁의
for children
희생으로
and
끝을
youth.
넘어서는 인간의 삶과 존엄을 침해하는 구조적인 문제로 자리 잡고 있습니다.
If we look at the world and Korea's space in the
전쟁과
world, we
분쟁은
cannot
결국
exclude
인간과
the history of
분열한
war.
존재에게 엄청난 아픔을 줍니다.
As
특히
a
가장 취약한
historical
약자인
wound, war is something that has affected our history immensely.
희생자로 만들기도 합니다.
For the past 70 years, this has continued.
전쟁을 빼놓고 우리는 이야기할 수 없는 것 같습니다. 전쟁은
These struggles are being
가족을
faced
바탕한
in
역사를
Palestine
가지고
and
우리의 삶에
Ukraine as well
깊은 상처를
today.
가져다 줍니다. 70년이 지난 지금도 여전히
The
한국은
militarization of
전쟁
Korea has become a big part of the country as a whole.
우크라이나와 가자의 많은 사람들과
And this
비핵화
militarization is directly connected to the war economy.
한반도는 분단으로 인해
Women's
세계에서
bodies
가장 큰 군사적 긴장이 있는
are
지역으로
being used
있습니다.
for this military economy as well.
군비 경쟁으로 연결되고 있습니다.
Our report
전쟁과
delves
군비
into
중에서
the stories
여성은
of
성폭력,
comfort women who were
성범죄,
stationed at
여성의 몸이
US
전쟁터로
military-based
변경됩니다.
camptowns. Like Kathy had stated
오랫동안
before,
여성의
these women had to live
목숨을
in the
지키는
system
해왔습니다. 저희 보고서에서는
under
미국의
the guise of
웨스턴
patriotism. These women were led into sex slavery
케이시가 벌써 이야기해
and were
주셨지만 기지촌 여성들은 국가가
used by the nation in
모색하는
this way.
성착취 시스템 안에서 살아야 했습니다. 국가가 애국이라고 하는 명목
In the
하에
60s, with increases in sexually transmitted diseases amongst US military personnel, the US the US began to run campaigns for STD testing centers.
그 한국 정부가 성병 관리소를 만들고 여성들을 대상으로
Thus, these women were forcibly interned at such sexually transmitted disease testing centers and which these centers forcibly processing and targeting these women. They were detained and forced to receive treatment. It is very surprising that there were even up to 10,000 troops in just one camp town in Gyeonggi-do province, for example.
여성 농민들도 강제 퇴거와 생계 파탄을 경험했습니다. 이들은 자신의 삶의 터전인 고향을 자신의 의지와
There are
상관없이
examples of a life of a girl who came
이들의 삶의
to the
환경과
life of a girl who came to Seoul at the age of 15 to find a job, went to a job agency, was sold, locked up, and suffered endless human trafficking and debt, and was forcibly detained and treated in a detention facility. And these incidents could be occurring anywhere in the world right now. As US military bases expanded, female farmers experienced forced evictions and destruction of their livelihoods. They had to leave their hometowns, foundation of their lives, against their will, and they experienced rifts between their homes' communities. Forced evictions and the destruction of livelihoods clearly show how structural violence that this divided militarized system inflicts upon women.
변화가 전쟁은 삶과 죽음의 갈림길에 서는 비극적인 서사이기도 합니다. 특히 전쟁터로 나간 남자들을
War
대신해서
changes the life story of individuals, families, and communities. During the war, we experience separation from our parents, brothers, sisters, and the people we used to live with. Furthermore, war is a tragic narrative that stands at the crossroads of life and death. In particular, women have worked to protect their families amid the burden of having to take responsibility for the livelihood of men who went to war. Women have become more involved in the economy and have been burdened with the double burden of housework and social labor. The issue of separated families should be approached as a humanitarian issue and women's human rights issue on the Korean Peninsula as well.
현재 이산가족의 수가 고령화되는 상황에서 남북 관계의 악화로 가족을 만날 수 없다는 것은 우리에게 무엇이 가장 시급한지를 보여줍니다. 지뢰 피해 여성의 문제도 중요한 여성 인권 이슈인데요. 이 운동을 너무나 열심히 하셨던 이정아 선생님께서 이 이야기를 정말 생생하게 들려주실 수 있으실 것 같습니다. 여성들은 특히 분단 사회에 사는 여성들은 단순히 전쟁이 없는 상태를 넘어선 빈곤, 폭력, 갈등, 자유, 복지, 인권, 정의가 구현되는
Women,
상태에
especially those in
살아남기 위해서
divided societies, have
노력하고
long been working for peace, not just in the absence of war, but in the pursuit of a world free from poverty, violence, discrimination, and injustice. Beyond simply halting armed conflict, women have been at the forefront of advocating for human rights, social justice, and dismantling the very structures that enable war. They have examined the underlying conditions that lead to war and worked to transform them. Moreover, women are not just victims of war, but they are key actors in peace building. Their role in creating a culture centered on peace and human rights is more critical than ever. Throughout this report, we continue to expand spaces where women of diverse ages, backgrounds, religions, and cultures can share their voices and experiences. It is essential that we acknowledge and address the different ways women experience division and militarism. Yesterday, while being part of a planning meeting for this webinar, I felt that this report is important more than ever. In the post-war era, economic aid from the US was not only accepted but also changed political, cultural, and lifestyle norms in ways that went unchallenged. As we face economic crises, rising inequality, individualism, discrimination, and hate, these dynamics are becoming even more pronounced under martial law. In the state of martial law, we must recognize that war and division have fostered a culture of militarism. This, in turn, has deepened class divides, ideological conflicts, and social fragmentation. One's allies, friends, and colleagues have become enemies due to political polarization, resulting in repeated cycles of violence, distrust, and alienation. We must move beyond militarism to build a new culture, one that prioritizes peace, human rights, and justice. Women have always been and must continue to be at the center of this transformation. Furthermore, I see that this report can be the beginning of further women's ability to organize. And I truly believe that this is a pivotal moment for solidarity and collective action. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Young-mi. We appreciate your presentation and your analysis as always. We're so lucky to have you as one of our longtime partners. I think now, and thank you so much, Hannah, for your interpretation. I know that that is not easy. And I think we have Unji back with us, and she can handle the next interpretation for 정아 선생님. So we'll hear from 정아 선생님 and Unji, if we could also share with the interpretation.
안녕하세요. 네네네. 반갑습니다. 저는
My name is
경기에
Jong Lee. I am working for Gyeonggi Women's Peace Organization. I'm so glad to meet you, all of you. So I believe the most violent legacy of division is landmines and unexploded bombs. So right now, we have a DMZ dividing North and South Koreas. And according to the International Organization Against Landmines, the DMZ area between North and South Koreas is actually not demilitarized zone, but is this most strongly militarized zone. So when landmines were installed during, like before and after Korean War, I suppose that there should have been prepared like a map, like a mapping of landmines installed over the area, but I don't think this map is correct. You can see that from so many incidents, like landmine explosion incidents taking place right now, and also many of those landmines are actually installed near like water area, like springs, rivers, and whenever there is like a flood, those landmines can flow down to like neighboring villages and harming people. So it is a direct threat to the human security living over there. And also there is a big risk of unexploded munitions. We find so many of those unexploded munitions around the DMZ area, and according to the statistics of 2016, there were like more than 2,000 people across the two Koreas were victimized to those unexploded munitions. However, this issue is almost like forgotten, like disregarded issue in South Korea. There was a case where a woman was injured by unexploded ammunition. And at the time, there were three women involved in the incident, and their mother and there was like three family members who were involved in the incident, like a mother and son were killed, and only a daughter survived, and so she was blamed to be only survivor of the incident. So it clearly demonstrates like how these unexploded munitions have an impact, like paramount impact on women. And also those damages or those harms can inherit to the future generations. So I heard many testimonies from people who live in the area of like prone to landmines and unexploded munitions, and they all say that like their harm continue like last to the future generations, and many times women is the biggest victim, and at the same time, women should be blamed for any incidents, any harms, even though they are the biggest victim of this division and the legacy of a violent division. So I think it is important to connect this impact to like a national strategy, like a political issues. So it's very difficult for an individual woman to raise her own suffering because everybody is talking about only like a political impacts, political harms. So that's the background against where the victims are actually marginalized from the enactment movement to compensate for the victims of landmines and unexploded munitions. And there is like some central movement, centralized movement against these landmines and unexploded munitions, but it only exists at the center, or like central government level. When you go to like local municipalities, you will see like almost no actions taken by like a city or county government for the resident living in that municipality. So, for example, like in Goyang City, I am living in Goyang City, in Gyeonggi Province. Well, we are still in a better position than other people in like living in other counties, because we are actually living near North Korea, the boundary to North Korea. So we have some local ordinance to recognize those lasting impacts of division and landmines and unexploded munitions, but I'm not sure if it has like a practical impact on the daily lives of people living here. And I want to emphasize that the damages or harms of those landmines are ongoing in our lives. So while the government is advocating for like providing a political or legal framework in this matter, but I'm not sure whether this like high level framework, like a legal framework, can have like practical impact, like positive impact on people's lives and like change their, like improve their living standards. So even it is very difficult to raise like individual harms of this division system. So it is even harder to raise the issue of like, what about women's situation? Like what about the specific impact on women? But if you see the cases like cases in like Cambodia and many like post-conflict countries, you see that there are active movement to recognize like specific harms on women and encourage women's participation in peace building and in post-conflict reconstruction process. But still, I have to admit that like still like women's participation is about like 30 to 40% compared to like when you say like men's participation is 100%. But in Korea, we don't even have that level of participation by women. And that's why we, as like a women's movement organization in Goyang City, we proposed to to enact a local ordinance to encourage participation of women. So that is actually my organization's main goal for this year, to enact this local ordinance. And in Gyeonggi province, we have several peace building policies, but none of those policies advocated for women's participation. So we are proposing an ordinance to encourage specific participation of women in those peace building policies. And also we have an ordinance regarding the situation in Kijicheon, like camptown, like US military camptowns. But it is right now the scope of the ordinance impact is very limited, so we would like to expand the scope of the ordinance to cover the surrounding areas of camptowns. And currently, Gyeonggi province recently launched a research project to archive the situations like history or stories of people living in camptowns. It is not easy for to encourage local people to participate in this kind of movement, but we are trying to encourage people residents to join this movement. Thank you for listening.
감사합니다, 정한 선생님. I think we started so quickly, I didn't get a chance to properly introduce, so just will say at the end, if folks who don't already know, Chong Lee is the standing representative of the Gyeonggi Women's Associated United, incredibly important organization that advocates for women's empowerment and peace building in the Gyeonggi province in Korea. She was also one of the co-founders of our Korea Peace Now campaign as well. So we're so grateful to have worked with her over the years. The Gyeonggi Women's Association is one of the leading women's groups in Gyeonggi province leading peace work. So now I will share, I think we have resolved some of the tech issues. So we'll share here this clip from Judy Chu.
Hello, I'm Congressmember Judy Chu, and I'm honored to address Women Cross DMZ on this important International Women's Day webinar, which is an opportunity to recognize the women-led work to achieve peace on the Korean Peninsula and around the world. Signed in July of 1953, the Korean War Armistice Agreement put an end to 3 years of horrific fighting, but it did not put an end to the war. Even today, more than 7 decades after the violence has ended, the Korean Peninsula and the Korean people remain divided. But we know that we can still achieve peace. And that requires work that transcends the conflict between governments and fosters people-to-people connection, which is why the work of Women Cross DMZ is so important. And in fact, as a member of Congress, I had the chance to visit the demilitarized zone and see firsthand the lasting division and tensions. But I also saw the instances of cooperation and people's hope for a better future. A few years ago, when I was chair of the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus, we held a congressional forum on North Korea and the Korean American community so that members of Congress could hear from experts about the challenges that lie ahead for reunification. I will never forget hearing the powerful testimony from an 86-year-old woman named Soon-Bak Kim, who was just a girl when she fled her home during the Korean War. At that time, she expected to spend just a few months away, but that turned into decades away from her family. In tears, she told us that her dying wish is to be reunited with them before time runs out. But each year, that time does run out for more and more divided families, which is why we cannot give up on our work to achieve permanent peace. That is why just last week, I participated in a press conference at the U.S. Capitol to announce the reintroduction of Representative Brad Sherman's piece on the Korean Peninsula Act. This important bill calls for an agreement to formally end the Korean War and would promote diplomacy by establishing liaison offices on U.S. North Korean relations. The bill also recognizes the tens of thousands of Americans who have relatives in North Korea by calling on the State Department to study possible avenues for them to see their families again, even just for special occasions. We must also be clear-eyed about the challenges we will face in making sure that the perspective of women is at the forefront of this effort. The Trump administration has systematically dismantled federal efforts to support diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that includes in foreign policy. That means the voices in the executive branch who can speak with authority about the importance of protecting and supporting women in conflict zones across the world have been sidelined. And that is why it is so important for organizations like yours to continue to perform this work, to fight for peace, and to ensure that women have a seat at the table. So thank you again for inviting me to participate in this important webinar and to mark this International Women's Day with so many women who are working tirelessly to achieve peace in the Korean Peninsula and around the world. I look forward to continuing our work together.
Yes, thank you to Representative Chu for those powerful and very engaging comments. So we will be joined shortly by another powerful representative woman from South Korea, Lee Jae-jung. But in the meantime, I have some questions for Young-mi and Jung-ah 선생님. So the first question is that many people across the globe were shocked last December when the now impeached President Yoon Suk-yeol declared martial law, and now we've seen unprecedented impeachment protests, millions in the streets, both for impeachment and also against impeachment and against his arrest. What do you think these recent events mean for the peace movement in Korea and for women's leadership specifically? So I'll first turn over to Young-mi.
네, 질문해 주셔서 감사합니다.
Thank you for your question.
채팅방에
There is one question on the chat box. I would like to answer to that question. The question is, we still have U.S. troops stationed in Korea, and what is the impact of this U.S. military stationed in Korea to women living nearby? So I actually wanted to raise this issue. According to the UNSCR 135, clearly advocates for women's rights living in military camp towns. And Lee Jung-ah also pointed out that aspect. But still, I don't think the Korean government accept that as an important agenda for national policy, and we didn't see much progress in realizing those policies into reality. So still, many people, maybe these days not Korean women anymore, but many women in Philippines and other countries are still experiencing, they are becoming victimized to those U.S. militarism across the world. So I think that is a clear representation of U.S. militarism. And it also creates conflicts between generations and between communities. In Korea, we had the history of people turning against each other due to different ideological background. So it actually gave us, like left us a legacy of not fully accepting diversity. And so I think that's also contributing to like older generations, like non-criticism of the U.S. Impacts on Korean Peninsula, because they only think like, oh, we have to be thankful to the U.S. Saving us from the war. And I think that is the mindset of those people who are against impeachment of President Yoon Suk-yeol, who are advocating for like closer ties between the U.S. and Korea, and they are actually like lawless. They are attacking the court and they disregard the rule of law. And I'm afraid that like more and more younger generations are joining this mindset, like these older conservative generations, maybe because they have like economic difficulties and don't see like a bright future. So I think women should be more active in progressing, like promoting intergenerational dialogues.
Thank you so much, Youngmi. I think first I'll just introduce Lee Jae-jung because she just joined, and then turn to Lee Jung-ah to answer the question, if that's okay. So first, hello, Lee Jae-jung 선생님. I'm so glad to see you.
안녕하세요.
So for those who don't know, I'll just introduce briefly. We'll turn to Lee Jung-ah and then turn back to you, I think, for your remarks, and then we'll conclude. So Lee Jae-jung is a member of the National Assembly, Republic of Korea. She is also a member of the Committee of Foreign Affairs and Unification and chairperson of the National Women's Committee for the Democratic Party of Korea. We are so honored to have you with us tonight. So I think maybe if Chonga 선생님 just gives a brief answer to the question, we'll just give her the minute or two and then turn to you and you can conclude us for the evening. Thank you so much.
그 재난이라든지 이번에 이제 내란
When
국면
there is like a
사태처럼 어떤
disaster
국가적인 그
or
상황에 참여하게 되면
like a national emergency, such as like this martial law thing, it is time we see mostly like women's voices is forgotten or like suppressed. And we only hear those people who are conservative or who don't understand what's really going on. And those men like this, they have like a stronger voice in these like emergency times. And so people sometimes think that like a peace agenda can be better promoted by those people who are in uniforms, because they know the conflicts, they know violence, and they know peace building better. But from the experiences of protest against President Yoon Suk-yeol's martial law, like in those many of those protests, we saw increasing people power, people like women participation in those protests. Well, it is true that like some conservative people criticize that like when women raise a voice, like it is the end of the country, something like that. But at the same time, progressive politicians and progressive people expressed their belief that maybe those women participants in those protests, one of them will become the first president, like a women president in Korea. But what I want to say is that at the end of this martial law emergency, there should be a social change. And this change should incorporate women's voice, women's opinions. That can only then we can truly transform the society. So we have to do our best to have women's voice heard and incorporated into social change, into social transformation. So especially in terms of peace building, when we speak of war and peace, I know it is difficult to hear women's voice, but still it only means that we have to try harder.
감사합니다. Thank you so much. I'll just turn it right on over to 이재정 선생님. Please go ahead.
네, 안녕하세요. 여기는 굿모닝이고
Hello,
거기는 또 밤인 것
everyone.
같습니다.
Now,
네, 너무
here, good
죄송합니다.
morning, but I say it's late evening in the US. I'm sorry that I joined you late because I have another important conference that I have to be present. But my mind, my heart was over here always. And I would like to continue pick on the conversation you had before I joined you. So there was actually backlash of women participation or emphasizing women's role in democratic protest in South Korea. Some people criticized that why you only emphasize women thing. You should more be focused on younger generations' active role in social change. Maybe we can see a similar criticism or a similar trend that going against diversity and affirmative action for women. We see the similar trends in the US and South Korea, same. Recently, I participated in IPU, International Parliament Union, and I also participated in many international women's conferences. And from my own experience in participating in those international women's peace conference, I'm sure that women should be at the center of peace building and social transformation. Right now, we see enhanced tension between the two Koreas. Military tension is increasing. And it seems that there is only a little possibility for dialogue to be held between the two Koreas now. But I'm sure it's time for women to motivate, encourage dialogue between the Koreas, because I know that only local congressman when he moved a bill, Korea Peace bill, and the bill was endorsed by many other congressmen. But I think the success of the bill at the time should be attributed to women's participation, women's raising voice, because women has been the biggest victim of the division system. And so only women can understand the suffering or harms of the division system best. And that's how women could contribute to the passage of this Declaration of Armistice, like the end the Korean War bill. And I also met a deputy in the U.S. Government, and we discussed about North Korean nuclear weapons issue. And at the time, I was not like fully active in this discussion because I was not sure like what to say or how to address this North Korean nuclear weapons issue. But even in that issue, I think women have been playing a key role in understanding, like interpreting North Korean nuclear weapons issue as like a peace building, like a peace movement issue. I understand that you had conversations about the victims of like comfort women for the US military, like, and when nobody was listening to there's like camptown women's voice criticizing the US military, and like when those women workers in Camptown village filed a lawsuit to request compensation for their sufferings to the US government. Well, the South Korean court ruled that like, it is South Korean government responsibility to take care of those women victims, and those movement and those results were only possible because the women, the victims themselves raised their voice and tried to solve their problems for themselves. And there was a great international solidarity movement for them. Now we are experiencing very difficult times, and human rights being violated everywhere. So sometimes I am even afraid of watching news to find the only terrible human rights violation news. However, but I think what can energize us is that you are like brave enough to advocate for peace when people are only speaking about nuclear weapons issue in North Korea. So I don't think it's time to hide. It's time for us to actually move forward, get to the front line, and we have to trust the harmonized power, like a balanced power of people, and then I will do my best in this journey.
감사합니다. We're so honored to have you with us. Thank you for making time in your busy schedule. So we have a few minutes left before the end of the hour. I'll just share. I know that today people have tuned in from all around the globe as we are translating between English and Korean to English. And so we're making this accessible globally. So we wanted to highlight and end on some things that people can do and to take action. So as mentioned in Representative Chu's clip, for those who are based in the United States, HR 1841, that's the Peace on the Korean Peninsula Act that was just reintroduced. It was actually reintroduced with 33 original co-sponsors, which is a 65% increase from last year, showing that we are gaining traction and more popularity with this bill and changing the political will for peace on the Korean Peninsula. So the link that's in the chat, for those who are in the US, please follow this here. And this Action Network tool will allow you to write to your representative and to urge them to co-sponsor this bill if they are not already. I think I'll now turn over to our panelists and ask them each, what is one thing that people can do today to support women's peace building leadership on the Korean Peninsula? I'll start with Youngmi and then go to Chong'an and with Lee Jae-jung. So please go ahead, Youngmi.
제가 생각하기에 가장 중요한 건
So I think
우리의
the most
지혜와
important thing, like the
정성
most necessary thing, is to build solidarity, because peace building cannot be done by one person. It should be done by coordinated efforts of women across the world, and we have to have like a sympathy with sufferings of other people in other areas. And based on those sympathy, we can build solidarity and we can build women's peace building power.
지속적으로 구축해 나가는 것, 그게 이제 우리가 해야 할 일이다라고 하는 생각을 하게 됩니다. 고맙습니다.
Chong'an 선생님, would you like to answer the question?
네, 지금 이제 한국 상황 안에서 이
In
여성
South
평화
Korea,
의제를
to
확대한다는
expand
것이
peace, women peace building agenda is not an easy task. However, we have never had like an easy time, like the right time to do this effort. So what is important is that like, we never give up and we continue to fight. Well, I can say that at least in my like own city, here we have like some channels already established to advocate for our voices, like women voices. I will continue to try to the energy maintain last, and the next step, the next task is to build solidarity, like further solidarity, and encourage other people, like more people, to join this movement. Actually, I am always empowered by the solidarity movement, like solidarity messages from other people. And I understand that like it's a 10-year anniversary of Women Cross the DMZ. So I am so happy to meet all of you here.
감사합니다. Thank you so much. Such important points from both. We can just close by resharing the report link. And please, everyone, read the report and share your feedback with us. We're very excited that finally, after many years, it's launched. Please, major applause to our interpretation tonight. Kang Eun-ji, thank you so much for your interpretation. And thank you to Hannah Lee also, and to Echo and Solby and the staff at Women Cross DMZ for such incredible, incredible support. So thank you all very much, and have a good night.